Here we go, episode 2 of the MMA Debate show, joined here by a guest I'm very excited about, somebody I used to work with what feels like forever ago. Of course, I'm talking about Matthew Wells. Thank you for joining me, man. Let the people know, what do you have going on? Where can we find you on the internet?
Oh, man, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, man. It has been a minute since we worked together back in the
Right.
MMA latest days, man. That was a while ago. But now I'm with Fanside.com, Flow Combat as well, covering events for them. And, of course, I have my weekly podcast with Kendrick Johnson called the Slip and Dip Podcast, where we have anywhere from 2 to 4 guests on every single week from the fight world, boxing and MMA. And we just talk to the people, man. We talk to them and, let them tell their story is what we try to do, And that's it, man. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. M Wells Art on Twitter. I'm on Instagram as well, and of course the handles for the podcast at Slip and Dip Podcast too.
Yeah, the one thing I do have to say about Slip and Dip, I remember when I checked out, episode 1 when you guys first launched it, and it was just you guys going back and forth. And I say we got video, Deontay Wilder, champions. It's crazy how quickly you guys have grown with that podcast.
Yeah, man. It's a grind getting folks on week to week, but we make it happen, man. We make it happen.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a bunch of great topics for you guys. Hopefully you enjoy. First things first, get started. Something that's a little bit old, but it's, of course, the man Michael Venom Page over at Bellator. Everybody's got their opinion on how he's being matchmaking. Is he fighting cans? Is he this and that? I want to start with you. What are your thoughts on how MVP is being, match-maked, I guess you can incorrectly say? And just what are your opinions on the whole MVP situation over at Bellator?
So some people are kind of like sour on like the matchmaking that he's been receiving over in Bellator, and I'm not, because I think it's something rare that we see in MMA where, at least when you think of in terms of the UFC, in the UFC you have guys fighting the best of the best of the best at all times, no matter how long of a layoff you have. If you're coming off a 2-year layoff, guess what? Here's number 5 if you were ranked in the top 10 when you left. So you don't tune-up fights when it comes to the UFC. In Bellator, you kind of get that. And it's something that you see in boxing all the time, where top guys, these warm-up fights before they get another big fight. And that's kind of like what I relate MVP's matchmaking to. I kind of relate it to, he's kind of getting like that boxing treatment, He's not getting like the top guy in the promotion every single time he steps into their cage over there. He's getting fights that will showcase skills, that will get people interested. Let him show off, let him do his little dance, let him do whatever viral moment is going on in a celebration, and it'll make the crowd go crazy. Sometimes it's a little bit too easy, and it's just like, all right, come on. And I get that, but at the same time, there is a lack of showcase fights in MMA when we think of the top promotions, and I think it's kind of a welcome change, in my opinion. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's my take on it.
I'll be honest with you. At first, I was one of those people. I was kind of pissed too. Like at some point, he's got to make the jump. He's got to start fighting these guys, and he did a little bit. And now he's back to, I don't want to call him cans, feel like it's disrespectful, but he's back to fighting people like that. And after his fight in Japan, I feel like I'm okay with it now. I think I've kind of accepted MVP as, you know what? Maybe not everybody has to be a top contender that's vying for that belt. Maybe we can have some of these circus fights, and I feel like putting him in Japan, like that was perfect. I mean, and he milked it. I mean, he knew how to put on a show. So personally, I'm being okay with it. You know what? He's got that highlight reel, and I think it's just a matter of, is Bellator going to pretend that, whoa, he's fighting these contenders that you've never heard of? Or are they going to say, you know what? Okay, he's fighting cans, but you'll watch and you'll enjoy it. So for me, I'm starting to be okay with it. I'm enjoying the fights. His last fight, it did feel really easy, though. I mean, when I see him dancing, doing a little shoulder thing, and then, you look and you're like, wait a minute, but the guy fought a UFC veteran, right? He's fighting legit guys, so I mean, it doesn't feel good while we're watching, but I feel like for Bellator, who's still trying to differentiate themselves from the UFC, it's okay, but I don't want them to try to sell me on Michael Page as a top contender if you're not going to book him that way. But what I would say is I feel like if Michael Venom Page was fighting in Ryzen and he was fighting all these cans, I feel like it'd be okay because that's the place to put on a show. So I feel like sort of Bellator have the right idea, but I feel like at some point you have to decide, are you going to have him fight just cans, put on a show and everything, or are you going to pretend he's an actual contender, have him fight the legit guys? So I feel like it's up to Bellator to sort of figure out what exactly they want to do with him. And also he's 33. So at some point you have to decide what you're going to do with his career at this point.
Yeah, that is a good point about his age as well, because it will creep up pretty quick. But I mean, I guess the good thing is they do give him, like you mentioned, they do give him a tough opponent every again, right? And we see, the Paul Daly fight was boring as hell, and everybody left with a sour taste in their mouth. And of course, we saw how the Lima fight got slept pretty quick. So, I mean, hey, if that's how it's supposed to be, though, when you fight tougher competition, the fights aren't supposed to look as easy. So I'm not mad with it either way. Either way, I'm cool.
Well, the thing I do have to say is when you have a showman like that, is it a waste to necessarily put him against those top guys where he's going to give you sort of this, I don't want to call it like a boring fight, but more fundamental fight where he's not doing the whole shoulder thing and chasing the guy down? Is it a waste to put him against these contenders and not get these fights, or is it better to, let him fight these smaller names and just let him show off?
Yeah, I mean, I think he wanted to do that against Paul Daly. But Paul was like, no, you're not going to do that against me. Here's this wrestling that I haven't used in 10 years, So, I mean, he was even doing it against Lima. He was trying to show up against Lima, and Lima slept him. So, I mean, that's the thing. He's just got to realize when he can do it, when he's in there with somebody that has precision striking like that, Like, okay, maybe tone it down a little bit. He's still going to give you something regardless. He's still try to give you a little bit of dancing. I mean, he is. That's part of him. That's part of his package. He is going to try to entertain you, not only with his skills, but with his dancing, with his antics and stuff like that. And people I think one thing that does get lost on him is that people take it as him being like super cocky. I think it's truly just him in the moment when he's in the cage. Because I've talked to a guy with no cameras around, just like hanging out for a little bit. He is one of the nicest, coolest dudes in the whole game. And he's really like humble, like when the cameras are off. And it's kind of crazy. I was like, I did not expect you to be like this, dude.
Right.
I told him that straight to his face, and he's like, yeah, I get that all the time. I'm like, all right.
I think it's actually a good point you bring up, because I feel like if people are so mad at it, is the fact that he seems like he's cocky. He seems like an asshole outside the cage, almost like he believes the hype from beating these guys. And I think that's where a lot of people have problems with it. Or, I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's a problem with Bellator, but I feel like they're mad at Michael Venom Page for believing his hype when he's fighting people that aren't at his level.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. That's a good point too. But I mean, hey, even if at the lower level, you don't see, I'll just say the lower level opponents, quote unquote, that he faces, you still don't see people doing what he does. Like there's nobody else. I mean, like you'd have to go back to Anderson Silva in his days before he came to the UFC doing those kind of things. Just clowning dudes like that.
So you mentioned Anderson Silva. You wouldn't be the only one to mention Anderson Silva. Our own Big John McCarthy, I believe it was him who said, I believe MVP fought better competition than Anderson Silva. What was your reaction when you heard that on air?
I just kind of laughed at it. Because, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, I get it. It's easy to make that comparison, and, it's easy to kind of compare the two. I guess you have to say, like, early career. I mean, again, like mentioned, like he's 33, right? So it's not really early career, so to speak. But I mean, I guess people are still wanting a lot more from him. Like we're saying, like we want to see him fight the top guy more often. So I don't know. I think that's kind of where it's like kind of lost on some people.
Yeah, I'd say I was surprised when I heard Big John say it, but I thought, maybe he's just trying to hype him up. Maybe he's doing his commentating thing.
Yeah.
Kind of like Mike Perry, where they say something wrong and then they double down on it, and they're like, you know what, I'm gonna go down on this sword. And that's where I had a problem with it. I was like, wait a minute, you said this comment. You're live, man. You're watching a fight. You gotta say something. But if you're wrong, you gotta say something. For me, it's definitely wrong. I mean, Anderson Silva, he had a big submission loss. Off the top of my head, I don't have his record, but I know he did fight top competition at the top, and he did have some losses. So I don't even feel like you could compare the two.
Yeah, no. I comparatively, Anderson was a much better, well-rounded fighter. Even earlier in his career. I mean, he had the jiu-jitsu game from day one. He had the striking. He had the Muay Thai. He had everything. We don't know what MVP has on the ground. I mean, that was awesome, the Paul Daly fight, right? So it's kind of like, what is the UFC comparison? A lot of people like to, I guess, point to Israel Adesanya, like in his ground game. Like, what can he do off his back? We don't know. We really don't know. We don't need to know.
Right.
So, no. As long as he keeps winning, keeps us entertained, that's all I care about.
All right, so final thing about MVP, Bellator come to you, they bring on Matt in a meeting, and they're like, all right, what's the future for MVP? What would you recommend? What is kind of like your final thing on MVP and his future?
Well, next for him, I would definitely put him against the top guys in the promotion. I don't want to. I don't want to see a Paul Daly 2. I don't want to see that because Paul Daly's going to try to do the same thing. I mean, maybe Lima. I don't know if you do Lima right away in, but I'd have to look at the whole roster because I forget who's all over there.
Right.
Yeah, but definitely one of the top, somebody with a name that people will know and respect. When you see that name on the card across from MVP, will be like, okay, yeah, I got to tune into that one. Not versus MVP versus random guy.
Right.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'd like to see maybe the Lawrence Larkin fight. I feel like that could be interesting.
Okay. Yes.
Lawrence.
Actually,
Right.
you know what? Actually, after that you said Larkin, after Larkin's last fight, that's what I was calling her. That's what I tweeted out. I was like, yes, give me Larkin and MVP. I forgot Larkin. See, there's so many guys I forget about over in Bellator. I do remember tweeting that out now. So yeah, that's a good shout right there.
All right, yeah, for me, I feel like Larkin, if Larkin's on fire, he can give you a good fight. And there are some times where it's a little lackluster, but if the two of them come out swinging, I feel like we could get a very good fight. If they do have him fight again, I want it to be like strategic, like have him fight in England, have him fight overseas. But if you're gonna have him fight in Oklahoma, and you're gonna fight some guy that works at the local barbecue joint, that's where I have an issue.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. Yeah, give me Larkin and MVP. Sign us up for that, please. That's my answer right there. That's what I'm going to give the boardroom. That's what I'm saying. Scott Coker, MVP. Lawrence Larkin, book it.
There we go.
Do it in Oklahoma too, so I can make the drive up the road.
Okay, yeah. I was about to say you'd probably be the only one who wants to see that one in Oklahoma.
No, right?
All right, so now we're outside of Oklahoma. Let's talk a little bit. We've got Jessica Penne having her issues with USADA. She claims one thing, USADA claims another. Basically, for people that didn't see it, I think she's got a long suspension. She's a little bit older. I think it's forcing her into retirement. Let's start with you, man. What are your thoughts on the whole USADA situation with Jessica?
It's unfortunate, man, because we've seen this happen to so many fighters in the UFC that they'll get, whether it be a false positive or a tainted supplement or whatever have you, and there's no consistency when it comes to the punishment. It's literally like, how important are you to the promotion? Because they like to say it's consistent, but it's literally not. Some guys get 2-year suspensions for things. Some guys get 1 year. Some guys get less. It's like the same sort of things. It's just all over the place. And Josh Arnett still has the biggest gripe in the world. A couple other guys whose names are escaping me right now. What's the one gentleman that had to leave?
Tom Lawler?
Tom Lawler, there we go. I was about to say pro wrestling now. Tom Lawler. I mean, his UFC career had to be ended. His MMA career was ended, essentially. He's pro wrestling now. He's still doing well for himself. But, it's something because you want to see consistency and you don't want to see favoritism. When you have rules that are in black and white printed on paper, you're supposed to follow those things, and that doesn't happen. And it's unfortunate for Jessica to have to go through that. And it leads into the whole thing. Well, is it time to rethink what we're doing with USADA? And I think, yeah, maybe let's open up the books again and let's see how we can address it differently. Because there's issues with who's really trying to cheat, who took something, and yeah, it's truly tainted. And how can we keep the sport clean without screwing over somebody who wasn't trying to take advantage of the system? And I think that's what I believe what Jeff's saying here, because we've seen too many instances of it before, and it sucks because she she poured her heart on that Instagram post, man. It's just like, dang, she's out here doing odd jobs just to keep the lights on, so to speak, and you hate to see it, man. You're in a what is it, $6 billion company, whatever the valuation is today in 2020, and you've got fighters here, driving for Lyft and stuff. Yeah. Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is crazy. It's a weird situation because you have Jessica Penne makes this post, and I feel like the purpose is, you're fighting all this stuff behind the scenes. You've got nowhere else to go. You're in a corner, and so you put this post out there and you let people know what's going on. Then USADA have a post out there, and then Jeff Nowitzki's kind of pretending he's on Jessica's side, kind of pretending he's with USADA. And I think Luke Thomas was the one who mentioned, not to trust any of these people, that none of them are your friends, and we know how he feels about anti-doping. But where it is weird is the whole the person gets suspended by USADA, and then if it's too long and you're too old, your career's over. And there's no alternative. There's no, it doesn't. I don't know if she's necessarily going to get cut and she can fight anywhere else. So my main issue is not, if she had something in her system that she shouldn't have, and it's happened a few times, I guess, okay, it's not great, but if there are repercussions, I can understand that. Where I have an issue is the whole, you understand where she is in her career, and you're going to stop her from making a living pretty much. I mean, you hear she's got to drive for Lyft and stuff like that. It's not even Uber. It's quite awful to stop a fighter from fighting at this point. I feel like there needs to be some kind of something they need to change in terms of maybe we cut her and we let her fight somewhere else. I mean, this. I feel like ending the career, that's way too much power, especially for, I think she was saying she took like a medicine or something like that. So
yeah.
It's like you mentioned, the inconsistencies with USADA. I mean, so we'll work with Nate Diaz. Oh, he's fine. And then we find out he's got an issue with his own supplement line. So it's like, I understand Jessica, probably the UFC higher-ups like, who? But, it's not fair to do that for her. It's not fair, that Nate Diaz is, taken care of in 10 minutes. I mean, I feel like you do, like you mentioned, you have to print something down, I mean, and talk about it. But I feel like USADA's reaching this point where they're not seen as, I want to say, legitimate anymore. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about them afterwards, but they have so many issues with Nate, with fighters. I mean, it feels like every suspension is simply tainted supplements. So at this point, I'm not even sure USADA is doing what they were supposed to do in terms of, cleaning up the sport like they claim. I feel like at this point, if you're ending someone's career and you're doing things weird like that, I mean, I just don't see how USADA is benefiting the UFC at this point. And then, Jessica Pene's manager went out, created a GoFundMe so they can fight it. I mean, I don't see what the point of going through all that hassle is. At this point, I feel like you'd be trying to get cut and just, released and go fight somewhere else. I just don't see what's the point of trying to go back and forth on such a silly subject.
No, I agree. I think that should be like the option, right? If instead of a 2-year suspension, if that's going to be the deal, if it's 2 years or longer, if that's going to be your suspension you're about to levy down on a fighter, it needs to be, hey, take your 2 years or the UFC will release you. Like, it's like choose option A or B. Because, yeah, like I'm towards the tail of my career. I can't afford to have 2 years on the shelf. Release me. I can go to Ryzen. I can go somewhere somewhere else where they don't give a damn about what's going on with the drug testing, and let me go earn a couple more paychecks somewhere else. That kind of thing. It's kind of, they do need to rethink the punishments side of things. Because like I said, like there is black and white, but not, because they keep moving the goalposts, whether it be like for the Nate Diaz situation, or John Jones is magically the first fighter allowed to have a trace substance in his blood at all times. So it's like they keep moving it depending on how important you are to the company at the moment. So it's just weird. It's just weird.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like that's a good alternative, like either take these 4 or 5 years, whatever ridiculous thing, or ask to be released. I mean, it just, it doesn't seem fair to me that you'd be locked into the UFC, and also you're not allowed to fight. I mean, I feel like anywhere else out in the real world, something were to happen within the company, you could get let go from that company and do something else. So my final thing on USADA, I mean, I just don't feel like they're doing things the right way, and this is another situation where we see them, messing up and just not looking professional in this case.
100%.
All right, our next subject, we've got a man fighting Saturday. It's going to be, of course, Conor McGregor. He's doing the media rounds and everything. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. There's a few things I want to talk about, but first of all, he did an interview with Ariel Helwani where he addressed a lot of stuff. One of the things he mentioned was that he was drinking a lot, and Ariel Helwani a little bit put the words in his mouth, talking about he was drinking during fight week. What was your reaction to him talking about the drinking? I mean, do you believe it? What's sort of your takeaway from that instance in the interview?
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting part to me, because that's how I thought about it before he even mentioned that, because like you go back to that press conference where it was, they literally, the press conference where they famously didn't have a crowd because they were worried about the crowds fighting too much between the Habib fans and the Conor fans. Conor was drunk off his ass at that press conference. And there's no doubt in my mind he doing that during fight week as well, because he was on cloud 9 coming off the Floyd Mayweather money, coming off the proper whiskey popping off, all that kind of stuff. Like, he was just on a different planet, like so far in his own head, like he couldn't step outside of the house without having a paparazzi around him. It was just like the highest he had ever been in his career. And he was just soaking it all in way too much, and definitely drinking it up a little bit too much too. And that didn't shock at all to hear that, yeah, we were drinking during fight week. I 100% believe that. 100%. And I was thinking, as that whole interview played out, I was thinking, Conor that we're seeing right now in this interview and from the subsequent little media day thing we've seen from, the reporters there this week as well, this is the same Conor that I remember seeing before the Jose Aldo fight. If you go back and watch the press conference of that, I covered that fight. He was in that same mindset. He was like, I remember him saying, I'm in a state of zen now, like where he was just super cool, super laid back, went out there and rocked Aldo's world in 13 seconds, And I think that's the kind of Conor that we're about to see on Saturday.
For sure, I agree with a lot of what you just said. The only thing for me, do I believe he was drinking a lot? Yeah, I mean, he's working with his whiskey. He probably has to do a lot of promotion, right? You got to show him it tastes good. Where I do disagree a little bit is I feel like during the interview, Ariel's kind of like pushing him towards, hey, were you drinking during fight week? Is it fair to say? And you see him kind of contemplate it like, yeah, okay, I guess we can say that. He's surrounded by good people. I mean, John Kavanaugh, Owen Roddy, all those guys. I don't know if they would have necessarily let Conor drink during the fight week. I mean, is it fair to say he's his own man? He probably just do whatever he wants. He's a champ, whatever, maybe. But I don't know if you're a professional athlete, you're taking on someone like Khabib. I don't know if you necessarily want to spend your whole fight week drinking, right? And, somebody made a video I saw on Twitter. I wish I could give him credit. I don't remember who did it. It was a Conor excuse count where they just kind of went over the couple interviews and they started, it was like 1, 2, 3, and it was getting ridiculous. And so I feel like it's a lot of excuses and it's an easy cop-out. Like, well, were you drinking the whole time against Khabib? Yeah, that's why I fought like shit, because I was drinking. But I'm sure if you won that fight, oh, no, I haven't touched the bottle. I'm sober as it gets. So do I believe he was drinking in camp? Oh, absolutely, 100%. Do I believe he was drinking during fight week? I don't think so. I think for me it's more like an excuse of, well, if he beat me, and because he's still trying to get that rematch too. So you say like, oh yeah, I was drinking, but I tell you what, sober, I'm gonna be the best damn wrestler you've ever seen. So I don't necessarily believe that he was drinking during fight week. I believe he was drinking in camp, but for me it's just excuses, and he's trying to get that rematch.
I like that angle too. I like it. It's fun to speculate on it, and I think to support my side of it, I think so far in his head, I think he was trying to emulate like a John Jones test there for a second, where he could say after the fight, "Hey, I was drunk all week and I still beat your ass, Khabib. How about that?" So I don't know. It's fun to speculate either way, but yeah. I definitely do notice the difference, though, in the overall tone of him leading up to this one.
It's funny you mentioned John Jones. As soon as he was talking about drinking during camp, first guy I thought it was John Jones, but John Jones can pull it off. Yeah. I mean, he's out there doing, apparently he's like smoking every day and stuff like that, but he can pull it off. I mean, he's performing. Conor just, the whole fight with Khabib, it felt like we were getting like a great value Conor McGregor. We weren't getting the on brand. It kind of felt like, oh, I just fought Floyd. Let me show up right quick, try to get my belt. He lost, and I was like, oh, okay, never mind. It didn't feel like we got the full Conor McGregor experience. And was that to drinking? Maybe, but I also think he didn't take that camp serious at all. And I think the Khabib loss was very important in terms of sort of grounding him and letting him know that you got to make some changes. And you mentioned the way we've seen him during fight week. I mean, even during the interview, I remember I saw an article before I watched the interview, and it was like, Cowboy was like, if he talks about my grandmother and my son, I'm coming for him. And then you watch the interview, and he's like, oh, he's a family man. He has a grandmother, a son. So I do feel like he's definitely a different mindset. But, it's funny. He did make me think of John Jones when he was talking about the drinking and all that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because John didn't back down from it, when he was in his back and forth with DC, man. I was like, oh, God. But, yeah, I think he's definitely got his head on straight coming into this one. And I think he's more focused on truly performing well versus just I think he's got the party and clowning out of his system for now at least. If a rematch with Floyd comes around again at some point, we might see that resurface again. But I think he's out. I think the second kid helped him out with that too.
It is possible. I mean, you mentioned that, but I felt like John Jones was going to be, clean and everything, and then you hear him talking about, oh, I'm going to go somewhere where TMZ can't film me, and then I feel like John Jones kind of got back to that stuff. And I feel like Conor's going to be the same thing, like, oh, I'm clean. He's going to win against Cowboy, and then it's going to be very easy for things to derail. So I'm not convinced. If I had to bet on it, I would not bet on him staying sober and, just doing everything fundamentally right for the rest of 2020.
Yeah. I think the result of the fight will determine that. If he goes out there and gets washed, I could see him definitely like being drunk on the Vegas somewhere immediately after the fight. I don't know. We'll be watching closely. I know that much.
For sure. Let's move on to our next topic. We're still going to talk about Conor. He's the money fight. We know that. But I want to talk a little bit about, a few people in particular have been very critical of the MMA media. Some of it warranted, some not, I feel. But the big thing was MMA media needs to ask Conor McGregor about the assault. And then, if they don't, they're not doing their job and their PR and all that stuff. We saw the interview with Ariel. He got asked about it. What is your opinion on everything? I mean, was that good enough for you, what Ariel did, asking the questions? Did you feel like MMA media did have to ask those questions? I mean, what are kind of your thoughts on what's a very tricky situation?
It's very tricky. We already see those comments that, hey, you guys need to do your job by asking such and such and such and such, during fight week. Whenever you get the mic, this is what you need to ask. Certain things do need to be addressed. And I do like the way that Ariel went about doing it, because especially in this particular situation, there's ongoing court thing. Like, you can't talk about certain things. And especially with the way the laws work overseas over there, like, they can't even print your name, in certain situations, until you're been proven guilty or whatever. Can't tell you who it is. They had to put his name. They didn't put his name in the paper over there. It was what was it, high profile athlete or whatever that they kept putting in the newspaper. However they would word it. So they couldn't specifically name him, and that's why, he can't dive into it. He can't address specifics that you would want to hear from an answer to that question. So, yeah, it's important to at least say, hey, we know this is a thing. Not just showing up and it's just not like a normal thing. Like, we can't ignore that there's going on. So you do have to address it. I like the way that Ariel did it. Again, I know Ariel asked the question knowing that he wasn't going to get an elaborate answer. So as long as you give it some sort of recognition, some sort of, acknowledgement that, yeah, this is an issue that people want to hear about, no matter what kind of answer you give me, I have to throw some sort of question about it at you, and yeah, I think Ariel did a good job with that.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I think the people, they make this mistake of thinking that the second you're gonna have access to Conor, the second you have that mic, you're gonna shout at him about these assault things. I mean,
dude,
we do,
right?
We do a lot of interviews. You gotta, honestly, you gotta butter these guys up before you start getting into stuff like that. You can't just, Conor, thank you for joining me. Tell me about this assault. Nah, you gotta work it in there, man. You can't just jump right into him with it. But I think this is a situation of you got to pick your moments. If you're going to go to a scrum, he's not going to give you a good answer regardless. But when he's doing his thing, he's jumping around at a press conference and doing his thing. You're not going to get an answer that makes sense. I think you have to pick your moments. And Ariel having a sit down with him, I feel like if you do 50 minutes of an interview and you don't talk about it, all right, in this situation, you're not doing your job. But I like the way Ariel did it. He asked it. If you're being realistic, Conor is not going to sit down and be like, all right, Oprah, let me tell you what happened. He's going to do exactly what he said. Oh, we'll see in the future. You guys will see. I'm cool. That's about as good of an answer as you can expect. What I also liked is that Ariel mentioned the baby mama stuff. That stuff that was coming out. He's got another kid and all that stuff. Yeah. I like that he mentioned it. Credit to him. But I don't know what people are expecting. Do you think Conor's going to sit there and just kind of tell you everything that happened? He's going to give you these bullshit answers. He's got lawyers, got people working for him. They're like, hey, if they ask you, you can't say anything. So for me, Ariel did the right thing. This was the right circumstance to do it in. I think you do have to ask about it, but you also have to pick your moments and accept that. Conor's not going to sit down and tell you everything that happened. He can't, and he's not going to, quite frankly. So I don't know what people want from MMA media. I saw people like, oh, Ariel should have pressed him. Ariel should have this. Man, you got to understand how these interviews work. You know what I mean? You can't start shouting at, you're not a police officer. You can't grill him. You can't stick the light in his face until he starts telling you everything. You have to work it into the interview. It has to be natural. Ask these questions and understand when you can press and when you can't. And, Conor gave you about as much as he could without at the same time, incriminating himself or anything. So I feel like the biggest issue is the people that don't understand how the process works. They want every single reporter to ask him about it. Listen, he gave you the answer, biggest platform you're probably going to get. And I think the thing people forget is not everybody has access to Conor. Did you see how long it took to see an interview with him? I can't just send a quick text like, hey, man, want to jump on Skype right quick so I can ask you about this? No, you have to, the people that have access, there's maybe 3 of them, and they have to do it intelligently. So I feel like people want something that, even if we wanted to do it, we can't deliver it to you. I mean, we can't go shouting at Conor to tell us about it. You have to pick your moments, and you have to do this intelligently.
Yes, 100%. There's so much of the behind the scenes to being a reporter, just in general, that a lot of people, just the regular random, eggs on Twitter, do not understand. They do not understand how these things work, man. When it comes from doing like sit down one-on-one like that, to where behind the camera, like on the cameras, you see Ariel, you see Conor sitting face to face for each other. What you don't see is off the camera. You don't see Conor's PR guy standing right behind Ariel. Like that was actually a point that came up during the interview when Conor started mentioning Pacquiao negotiations, and I know who it was off the camera being like, you can't talk about that. And Conor was still tried to finish his answer. There's so many things like that go on, and there's also, like you were saying about the grilling people. You can't just start an interview and grill people. One of my biggest, I guess, controversial moments like that was on our podcast when we had Andrea Lee on, right when the whole issue with her husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband tattoo thing came on. People were expecting us to say, joining us on the Slip and Dip podcast is Andrea Lee. Why the hell did you marry a racist? Like, that's how they wanted the thing to start off. And I'm like, dude, y'all don't understand how this works. Y'all do not understand how this works. Like, you have to have a natural conversation with somebody. Yeah, you got to ask the tough questions, but you have to ask them in a nice, respectful way to where they just won't, A, completely shut you down, B, hang up on you, and C, all of the above, and never talk to you again. Like, there's so much that goes into these things. And, shout out to Andrea, man, because she broke down and, crying on that interview, and that still wasn't enough for some people. So, I don't know. Like, some people want to see that. They just want to see you're in the wrong, and they just want to see the finger pointing and all this stuff. That's not how it works. That's not ever how it's going to work. So if the question gets asked from one person and you get a response, that should count for everyone else. Do not expect to see everybody else ask that question. Do not expect to see the question restated a different way, especially when it's stuff tied up in litigation that can't really talk about. So.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Andrea Lee because I do remember watching the interview, and if I remember correctly, I think you guys were the very first talk to her when that happened, and I thought the way you guys did it was so smart because it wasn't, hey, and by the way, her husband has a swastika tattoo. What the hell is wrong with you? It was like you mentioned, it was really done tastefully, and it was done very intelligently, and I feel like too many people think we're police officers. I mean, my very first interview I ever did, the fighter had been knocked out previously, and I didn't set up the question correct. Like, I didn't butter him up enough, and he told me to get fucked and hung up on me. So that's where you learn the hard way, unfortunately, that you can't just come out and start grilling these guys. You got to be intelligent. But at the same time, you do have to ask them the questions. I feel like the criticism of, nobody's going to ask them, you'll see. All right, that's fair. We do need to ask it. But once the question's asked, it's like, stop. I mean, what more do you want from us? Ariel got the biggest platform. He I don't want to say he put his job on the line or whatever, like his access with Conor, because, let's be honest, but he asked the tough questions, asked a few of them. That's about as good as it's going to get, man. I don't know what people want exactly. Conor's not going to break down in tears. I mean, that's the way to ask that question. The question was asked, and that's about as good as it's going to be. I mean, whether you want it to be better than that or not.
Yeah, 100%. And people always expect the tough questions to come at any given opportunity, which is not, it's just not a reality. Like when we have these press conferences like we're going to have today, for example, between Conor and Cowboy, Dana's going to be in the middle. I'm sure a lot of people will be expecting the question to be thrown at Dana about Mike Perry tweets. Is that really the right time to ask Dana about Mike Perry tweets when you're trying to sell a pay-per-view for Saturday? Not necessarily. So, I mean, unless if that whole press conference starts really, really dying down, then maybe you ask towards the end. But ideally, you want to save that conversation with Dana for later in the week. Maybe on the fight night or something like that. Maybe at his post-fight scrum or something.
Yeah, if you have a scrum or something.
There's a time and place, especially when you're going to be talking to that person more than that week. It's not always the right time to ask every single question.
Right, 100%. So moving on to our next subject, I want to talk about Mr. Street Jesus himself, Jorge Masvidal. Kamaru Usman did an interview recently. I mean, he did his whole thing with Jorge saying, which let's not act like that's the first fighter to ever do that, but basically saying that Jorge Masvidal for him isn't next, that he has to earn his title shot and everything. What's your reaction to that whole situation with Kamaru?
I agree. I agree with Kamaru. Masvidal had a hell of a run in 2019. Hell of a year for him. They created a whole new belt for him and his opponent that he ended up taking home. But at the end of the day, does that automatically grant him a real title shot? I don't think so. Maybe after one more fight. Maybe if there's an injury to whoever Kamaru's next opponent is going to be, maybe you slide him in there. But there's so many people ahead of him to where, I think you got to at least look at maybe two. I think two more fights, ideally, and then you can slide into a real title shot. But the way the UFC, I'm speaking from a merit base here, and we know the UFC isn't about merit base, considering just a certain fighter about to get a title shot off a 2-fight losing streak. But we don't need to dive into that right now.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not mad at what Maru said, man, because there's people in line. There's people in line that are ranked higher that deserve that shot before he does. I mean, yeah, I get the whole gamesmanship of saying, the who thing and everything. And of course, y'all know he knows who Jorge is, obviously. But yeah, man, you gotta work your way up there. But again, I'm speaking from merit. What do I know in 2020 when it comes to the UFC?
All right, this is one where I'm going to have to disagree with you. I know you brought up the merit and everything. For me, I'm cool if he gets a title shot, man. I mean, 3-fight winning streak. I mean, the Darren Till one for me is probably the biggest win out of all of them. I mean, that's really the one where I was like, oh, holy fuck. So for me, I was satisfied with, you got Darren Till knockout. You knock out Ben Askren. I mean, very, very quickly, but you knock him out. And Ben Askren, looking at it today, probably not the biggest name. At the time, he was considered pretty big. He was coming off that controversial win over Robbie. And then what's his name? And then Nate Diaz. All right, we can argue that Nate isn't maybe the biggest name that you can just jump directly to a title shot. But honestly, for me, 3 fights, 3 finishes, from a making a fight, getting a lot of people to watch and stuff, obviously he's next. But for me, merit-based, 3-fight winning streak, 3 knockouts, 3 impressive performances in all of them, I'm satisfied, man. For me, if he gets the next title shot, I have zero problem with that. But one thing I do want to hear from you is you said there are people ahead, and I'm probably forgetting some names, but who did you have ahead of him for the title?
Oh, let's see. Let me pull it up while I have it here. I mean, I said a couple, but I mean, for me, I would have Leon Edwards there. I would have Tyron Woodley up there still. Because Woodley never got an opportunity for his rematch. He took that time off, and I know that those two are scheduled to fight, so the winner of that should be next for Kamaru. And then in the meantime, if Masvidal wants to stay active, which I would assume he does, I don't care who you put him in there against. I mean, look at the rankings right now. It's Woodley, Covington, Masvidal, and Edwards, and Dos Anjos at 5. So, I don't know. Do Masvidal and Covington in the meantime. I don't know. Let's have some fun with it. But I think the winner of Woodley and Edwards should get the next title shot.
I can definitely understand that one. I'm going to pretend I wasn't salivating when you mentioned Covington versus Masvidal. I mean, damn, that's okay. I want that one. But for me, I mean, Leon, maybe. But I feel like he's getting guys who aren't quite at the top contender. I mean, like Gunnar Nelson and stuff like that is good enough. But for me, not quite title shot. Woodley, for me, the fight against Usman, okay, I get the argument that, I talked to Dean Thomas a little bit afterwards, like, oh, he was off, he didn't feel good. Okay, I understand that, but that was decisive, man. That's about as decisive as it gets. Will they fight again in the future? Probably. But for me, if Leon and Woodley do it, and then you give Jorge, for me, that's the best thing to do. I mean, Jorge versus Covington, why not? But I feel like we're not going to see Covington for quite a few months. Woodley and Leon, I don't even know if that fight's official. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But if they're doing their thing, I really don't see how you could argue that Jorge Masvidal isn't next for it. I mean, for me, like I mentioned, I'm satisfied with it. Obviously, from a storytelling point of view, okay, that one should be next. But for me, I just don't see Leon or Woodley being ahead of Masvidal with everything he did in 2019.
No, yeah, in terms of, and again, like, yeah, in terms of like popularity and what's going to sell to the casual, um, yeah, there's no doubt you put Masvidal up there, but I like to speak from the merit side of things often, and that's just like not reality when it
That's
comes to
not
UFC and
UFC,
matchmaking.
man.
No, not anymore. Not anymore. It's not. Um, but here's my thing: like when you look at the Usman and the Covington fight, you saw Usman comfortable with striking
Yeah.
with Covington the entire fight, and you could say, well, the wrestling would cancel each other out, maybe, but they didn't like he didn't even like pretend like he needed to go there because he felt so comfortable on the feet. Whereas in the Woodley fight, he was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not gonna try to strike with you, buddy. Let me put you on your back as soon as I can." So there's that element that's different there, where it's like he fears the power of Woodley. So if Woodley shows up and there's not an off night, which I saw it from like he was coming into the like walking out, I was like, I have a strange feeling Woodley's gonna look really flat here, and sure enough, he had that deer in the headlights moment like he had against Roy. It was just not him, just not the same dude in there. So I do want to see that one run back, like you said. If they do end up making that official, like you said, it's like one of those on and off again things where we hear it's happening and it's like there's no date yet or whatever. Whatever. Like if they schedule it, the winner should get the title shot. If not, I mean, yeah, they're trying to do the craziest things, you know, put Kamaru Usman with the real belt in there against Masvidal with BMF. Let him walk around with that during fight week and call it a 2 title shot, whatever the hell they want to bill it as. Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on to another subject. This time I want to do our wild card. Last time on the first episode, our wild card was Brendan Schaub and whether or not he should be covering MMA. That was an interesting one. I feel like everybody has strong opinions, but for this one, I have some a little bit less fun. I want to talk about the Reebok deal. We saw it get implemented in 2015. I feel like everybody has their opinions. For you, what did you think about the Reebok deal when it first started? What do you think about it now, and what's kind of your takeaway on this whole Reebok deal?
I still hate it. It. The only aspect that I liked is that it wasn't too like upset with guys looking similar, like in what they're wearing inside the cage. Like that part didn't bother me as much. The part that bothered me is obviously the pay, the restrictions on their sponsorships and things like that. Like, yeah, okay, have a standard fight kit, but like you do for the main eventers where you put like the logos like on the one little part of this trunks or whatever, let everybody do that. Like, like they should have done that from the jump. Like, let people still make their money. Like, don't restrict these guys who are not paid very well, comparatively to other professional organizations. Let them bring in whatever money they can to put food on the table, because this is not a game that guys are going to be around for forever. It's a very, very dangerous game. It's a very short-lived game. And for those that only get like 1 or 2 fights in the UFC, they need to cash out what they can. And the Reebok deal limited so much of that earning potential. It's crazy. And it also had a ripple effect not only for the fighters in the UFC, but other fighters as well, outside of organizations, because some of these companies were like, you know what? We're going to step out of this sponsoring MMA fighters thing. We can't get the big guys. We're just not going to sponsor any anymore. So, sorry. We're going to cut off this avenue of revenue for folks. So, and that was really disappointing as well. And it also affected media as well a little bit, because there were some media folks out there getting sponsorships, however small it may have been. But there are some, media folks getting paid a little bit as well. But all that stuff, no more when Reebok came around. So, yeah, I would love to see a rethink on that deal as well.
All right, for me, the Reebok deal, when they first started, their thing was all, like the NBA and all these leagues have like one sponsorship, like the NBA has Nike, for example. So I like the fact that the UFC, I mean, their big thing was we bring in Reeboks, we want to look more professional. We have like these uniforms. So I think from a presentation standpoint, it looks really good. It does look really professional. I mentioned the NBA. NBA, everybody's got their Nike, everybody has Reebok on during UFC, so I like that in terms of it did look more professional, and I think it Presentation wise, I think the UFC already looked really good with their camera setup and everything. But from the uniform standpoint, I thought that looked really good too. Where they made the mistakes, like you mentioned, the money. I mean, if Reebok was going to come in and not compensate for getting rid of sponsorships, I don't understand what the point was. I mean, you saw PFL, for example, they, a lot of people were like, well, maybe just with the Reebok, let guys get maybe 2 patches or something. PFL came in like, we're going to do that. You're going to look good, but you're going to get maybe 2-3 sponsors on your shorts. And I still don't see why the UFC refuses to cave. I mean, a few guys get to have Monster. I mean, basically, it's the patch that says I'm a UFC favorite. I get to have Monster on my shorts.
Yeah.
So I think from a presentation standpoint, it looks good. From a money standpoint, when people see the Reebok deals, they freak out. The Reebok money, it's like, oh, Reebok gave you $1,000 for being on the prelim. What's the point? Like, I get that you don't want to eat clean, bro, on people's asses during fights. That's fine. I get that. But it's like, if you're not going to compensate with the pay, I mean, and then the NBA and all these other leagues, they do things correctly for the, getting that revenue. But the UFC still has some issues. And, did people mention, what's it called, the Fighters Union? I feel like that would definitely help. But, yeah, the Reebok deal, it looks great. I really like what they did. I feel like in terms of the presentation and everything, it looks good. It looks professional. I like the idea. But, man, the pay is what shit on everything. I mean, even the sponsors, we don't want guys to have sponsors because it's not going to look good. Okay, maybe, but, man, if you're not going to pay them the difference, then what's the point? Like, why are you, you're taking away this money. I feel like less people complain about the pay if they have those sponsors because they can make up for it. But now it's like you hear what these regional guys are making from Reebok compared to what they were making from sponsors on the regional scene. And it's, in the words of DeMarcus Cousins, really ridiculous. I mean, it's definitely something that, just the idea was good, but, man, the pay just set everything back. And I get you don't want to pay, like, millions every event, but it's like, look, man, if you're going to sponsor the UFC, either you're going to do this right or don't do it at all, but don't half-ass it like they're doing it right now.
Yeah, 100%. And the money is the main thing for me, right? That's the biggest thing for these fighters. But also, Reebok's fumbled so hard right out of the gate, misspelling fighters' names.
Oh yeah.
Just messing up like with the faulty kits. I remember I think it was Hilla Hill posted like a video of her like wringing out one of the bras, like one of the sports bras, like, and the dye was coming off of it. Like, there were so many issues right out of the gate. And I think if they came out of the gate fixing those issues and also had, I guess, what they called, like, the Reebok 2.0, where they integrated the colors.
Yeah, such a huge innovation, right?
Yeah, like, that should have been there from day one, not have everybody in black and white or black and gray or whatever, white and gray, whatever, color combination it was. Just those little things right out of the two would have helped, I guess, with the transition. But we're screwing on pay. We're going to mess up the name on your shirt. Your fight kit might fall apart. It was just a complete clusterfuck right out of the gate. So, it's one of those things that's definitely going to go down as one of the most, I guess, infamous deals in MMA history. But hopefully going forward, man, they figure out something to help these guys get paid better.
Yeah, for sure. All the fighter misspellings. I mean, it was fun. We got some memes out of it. But, man, if you're trying to look professional, you don't want to be making memes on your fight kit. So when they first started, I hated it. I was like, look, they're black and white. They kind of look like shit. Now they innovated the colors. And then eventually to the colors, they introduced the oops, we spilled bleach in our fight kits. It looks better. It looks better, but, man, if you don't fix that pay, I don't see what's the point. My question, though, is if Nike or Adidas had taken over, would things have been better? I mean, is it that, you got Nike at the top, Adidas at the top, and then you kind of have Reebok where it's like, well, we're not quite any of them, but we do sports. Would it have been better if a Nike had taken over? I mean, is this a Reebok's fault or is this the UFC's fault because they didn't, negotiate things sort of correctly in their deal? I mean, I feel like if Nike had came in, they would have done a much better job than if Reebok had. Especially, you mentioned like the ringing out the bra with the colors. I feel like Nike would have given us a much better presentation, at least for the fight kits.
Blame John Jones.
Oh yeah.
Blame John Jones. Because Nike was in the UFC's pocket for a minute.
Yeah.
Sponsoring John Jones, Junior Dos Santos, and who else? Somebody else. I know it was at least 3 fighters that had the Nike gear, and then John Jones had to go do things outside of the gun that were unsavory, and illegal. And Nike was like, all right, let's maybe back away from the MMA game. I think that definitely if Nike were the ones who step in, I definitely think we could have seen higher pay across the board because Nike just, God, they don't know what to do with their money. Whereas Reebok is kind of like, hey, we're trying to stay alive over here. Let's, help each other out. Let's cut me a deal on what we're paying these guys type things. I think Nike would have been like, yo, you want what? Man, let's take that and double it for these guys, So that is unfortunate that it wasn't a Nike because I think that would have been really cool to see, and it definitely would have given it a lot more prestige out the gate as well. Because everybody's like, oh man, Nike, they got Nike kits now. That's kind of dope. Yeah, like people would definitely want to go to the UFC store. Man, I'm gonna cop that Nike gear. I'm just saying, a little bit different when it's $3 logo.
Oh, for sure. And there's always going to be one fighter who's going to be like Roy Jones Jr. that's going to manage to negotiate to get the Jordan logo, and that's going to be the one that really kind of wins everybody over.
Right. Oh yeah, that would have been John Jones for sure. For sure, it would have been. Or maybe it could have been Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva was the other one that I was thinking of that had the Nike gear.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I mean, he had the soccer logo on his shorts, and John Jones, even the Gatorade. I mean, Nike Gatorade, that's as legit as it gets. This isn't corn nuts or dude wipes or condoms. Like, you're not going to get more legit than Gatorade and Nike.
No, you're not, man. Dang. Oh, John, did you have to party so hard?
But the thing about Nike, I think you're right. They would have done things differently with the sponsors as well. Because look at the NBA. Adidas, no sponsors. And now you've got freaking, Lakers have Wish. I mean, does that look professional? I think it's Milwaukee and the Bucks who have Harley Davidson. I mean, you're telling me some of those logos look good. So I feel like it's partly the UFC's fault. But, man, Reebok kind of really half-assed it on this one.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I wish we could do it like let's read it one time and make sure Nike gets that deal.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to my next topic. A little bit of a smaller one, not quite this big headline, but one that surprised me nonetheless. Thiago Alves and his management rejected the PFL. I'm not going to sit there and tell you I've got all the details, but that one did surprise me. What are your thoughts on him rejecting the PFL? He's now a free agent. He's talking about he wants to fight if the money's right. What did you think about him rejecting PFL?
So that's pretty interesting to me because I think he would be the type of guy that could go in and make some noise in the PFL tournament, because again, like we see these guys that they're fighting for $1 million in this tournament to where these are guys that would have virtually no shot at $1 million in any other promotion ever. And for a guy who was in there against, GSP at UFC 100, who is still very much a highly skilled athlete, I think he could go in there and make some noise, make the finals, possibly. And to reject that shot at $1 million, kind of crazy. I'm wondering what they were paying him because I haven't seen the details either. I'm wondering what they offered him on a per fight basis. It had to be an extreme pay cut, or maybe he was trying to get more than what he was trying to, earning UFC. I don't know, but whatever it is, it's kind of crazy to see that. It's kind of crazy. I would have expected him to just sign up, to be honest with you.
Right, you're right. It is crazy because especially at this point of his career, it's like, man, if you're not trying to fight for $1 million, well, what's the point? And now, especially PFL, if you're gonna sign there as a veteran who's not trying to get used as a stepping stone, now's the time. You hear about Roy McDonald signing, Ray Cooper's coming up and all that stuff, but if you're going to sign for them and you're a little bit older and you want that, now's the time. Don't try to come back 2 years later when they've got more legit guys. But I was surprised as well. I mean, I think Lance Palmer, when they talk about his pay, it's ridiculous. I mean, I really don't understand the move. He's making articles like, I want to go to Bellator, I want to go to PFL if the money's right. Like you mentioned, unless there's like an extreme pay cut, I don't see why you'd say no to PFL. I mean, aside from maybe Roy McDonald and, maybe Ray Cooper, but I feel like he's got as good of a chance as anyone to make it to the finals. And at the same time, say something happens to Roy McDonald during the playoffs, right? He loses in a shock to somebody. Okay, there goes like the toughest guy out there, and you could very easily not have to struggle. So unless the money isn't right, I don't see what's the point, because PFL seems to me like if you're a Thiago Alves, this is the place you go to at this point in your career. I mean, unless you want those circus fights at Bellator, but Bellator's not going to give you $1 million at the end of the fights, or 50 Cent's not going to give you $1 million either.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, 100%, 100%. It's a little. I do want to see the details on that. I'm very curious about why, why not. Maybe he was like on the fence about competing. Period. I don't know, but maybe once we have that answer, I think it'll kind of help us see the picture and paint that answer for us. But still, it's still on the surface. It's just like, really,
Yeah.
really, yeah.
All right, one last thing here before we wrap this one up. Coming back to Conor McGregor, people are talking about how this fight week feels. Does it feel like a big fight? Does it feel like Conor fight week and all that stuff? I'm in France, so I'm all the way across the world, so mine is probably going to be different from what you're feeling. But so what are your thoughts on this fight week? Does this feel like a big fight week? Does it feel like Conor McGregor fight week?
This was my question coming in too, right? I had no idea what this fight week would look like, considering there's no title fights on this card. It's relatively, to the casual fan, a relatively weak card. Like, I love this card personally. Like, all the undercard fight, like, there's so many fighters that I've interviewed and stuff like that I enjoy watching on this card. But
Sadiq Youssef.
yeah, Sadiq Youssef's one of them. I mean, there's Claudia Gadelia, Holly Holm, Raquel Pennington. Like, it's just a good card for me personally. But as far as the Conor aspect goes, I'm very curious to see what it'll be like as the week progresses, because I've covered some of Conor's biggest fights. I've covered I've covered the UFC 189 against Chad Mendez. I covered the fight week against Aldo. I covered the second fight against the second fight's Nate Diaz as well. And all those were in Vegas. And the interesting thing was, like, I remember showing up for the 189 fight, Chad Mendez, and literally I got there, I think, on a Wednesday, and from that Wednesday, it was nothing but, Irish flags, Irish people all over the place. It was like Ireland took over Vegas early, and they stayed strong all week. For the Aldo fight, it was like, okay, Friday. For the Diaz fight, it didn't feel that way virtually at all until the water bottle moment at the press conference thing. So, wait, is that the first fight? I forget which one that was. But the water bottle incident, that was the one I covered. Whichever it was, whether that was the first or the second fight, I forget which one. C202, but for that one, it didn't feel like it until Friday. So it was like aggressively later in the week, we didn't see like that crazy Conor fanfare, So I'm interested to see what this one is gonna bring, because each one of those fights that I just mentioned all had something unique about it. Their title fight. Well, Nate Diaz is an enigma, so he's gonna have his crazy fan base. Cowboy, one of the most favorite fighters across the board. You're hard pressed to find somebody who does not like Cowboy Cerrone, but he doesn't necessarily bring like the crazy fanfare along with him. I think he brings like the normal crowds, right? I was in Austin when he headlined against Eros. It was a decent card for it, but it wasn't like crazy, So I'm really interested to see. I don't know if it's going to be like so over the top, because what is Conor really fighting for here, other than just to get active again? I mean, like there's nothing significant on the line, so I don't see it being like super crazy in terms of the fanfare. Yeah, I expect there to be a large contingent of Irish fans in the arena, but I don't think it'll be as crazy as we've seen in the past. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I feel like the biggest thing that makes the fight exciting, that gives you all this hype and all these clips on social media, is those press conferences. And we're going to get one. I don't want to say while they're cutting weight, because apparently they're not. But it's like, why wait until now? I feel like the press conferences, I don't want to say that's what made Conor, but when you think Conor, you think those press conferences where he's shouting at guys, who the fuck is that guy, all that stuff. Those are all press conference moments. So will this press conference light a fire under the fight? I don't know. I don't know, obviously, but I can tell you that from France, no one has any idea. Like, well, the sport, it's illegal here, so not a lot of people are aware of it. But people know Conor McGregor, and starting last week, I got hey man, is Conor fighting? Is Conor doing something? What's going on? And I'm having to explain like, oh yeah, so he's fighting Cowboy. I'm sorry, what? And then so you got to explain who Cowboy is, but I feel like Conor, at least from where I'm at, is carrying this fight, and I have to explain who the guy he's fighting is. Half of it is me explaining that what's not necessarily a gimmick because he's got a ranch and a horse and a hat. So I feel like I'm sure in the States it's very different, but I feel like for the casual fans, Conor's the one carrying it, and people aren't 100% sure when he's fighting. People don't know who he's fighting, and I feel like the UFC could have hyped this fight a lot more. I think to wait until fight week. Okay, so you want people to tune in this week and then be ready for Saturday, but I feel you got to start earlier. And this one is on the UFC's fault for not having more press conferences, for not having more media. And I know Conor doesn't like media. I mean, he does good with it. He's got these classic lines, but from hearing him talk, I don't think he likes media a whole lot or doing it. But I feel like that's a mistake, man. I mean, there's no belt on the line, and apparently that's important for casual fans. But man, if Cowboy's not going to do his part to bring a lot of hype to the fight, then you got to step in and do something. I feel like a big reason why it's small is because a lot of people were scared that Cowboy wasn't going to be a big enough opponent to bring this fight a lot of hype. As much as I like Cowboy, as much as I enjoy the fight, and I'm looking forward to watching it, I feel like it's right. I feel like Cowboy is not doing his part to sort of, I don't want to say you have to beef with Conor every time, but I feel like it does play a part in this fight not having as much hype as it could possibly have at this point in the week.
No, I agree with you, man, because it's kind of tough if you're expecting, Conor's opponent to bring something out and kind of rile stuff up, especially a Cowboy Cerrone, who I don't know the last time, I don't think he's ever done that. He's always, at every press conference, he's always just going to smile and, you know what, I'm going to show up and I'm going to kick some ass and drink some, that's his thing. He's just always the go with the flow type of guy. He's always going to smile. He's gonna answer every question. He's gonna laugh a little bit, but he's not gonna talk shit. What we've seen is the opposite side of that. When somebody gets in his head, he has issues. Right. On fight night. But I don't know, man. It's gonna be interesting. I think it's somewhat of an experiment for the UFC as well, considering how often do they do non-title pay-per-view headliners? Virtually never. So I think it's kind of an experiment here to see what they can get out of Conor McGregor in 2020 in terms of numbers on the back end. And maybe we see similar cards throughout the year. Maybe we will see more non-title fight pay-per-view headliners if it is a big name, so to speak. But it's going to be interesting, man. There's a lot. And the only thing I hate about this is that we don't see numbers anymore. Yeah. I'm one of the people that say if you're a casual fan, if you're not in the media, so to speak, why do you care about the numbers? But we're in the media. I want to know what the numbers are. Right. Yeah. I want to know what they are. Tell me how many pay-per-views did 245 do? We know. It's just Dana saying, "Oh, it was a great night." Yeah, good for you. We got to take your word on that because we don't see numbers anymore. So, I'm really curious to I guess, see Dana's reaction because that's the only indication we get anymore about how well the pay-per-view did. So, I'm looking forward to that after the fact.
One thing I'm going to have to disagree with you about is Cowboy at the press conferences. I feel like for a normal opponent, he's going to, like you mentioned, the Budweiser and I have my son and my grandmother. But the one thing is the seeds were planted 5 years ago at a press conference where they went back and forth. I mean, I believe he got called Big Nuggets, which great line, by the way. But I feel like that's where the seeds are planted. I mean, this is the highlight, the why should you watch this fight for this beef that happened 5 years ago. That's kind of like the clip the UFC is showing to get me hype, and that's not going to give me hype anymore. 5 years ago I was hype, but I'm going to need a little bit more than that today. So I feel like Cowboy can do it, but
he can,
But like you mentioned,
he can, and I think I forget. I want to say he was asked a question about what he thought about Conor moving up to 55, and I think his response was like, "Oh, we're too big for him up here. Right. He didn't want to come up there." And then when Conor cut him off and was like, "Oh, you're stuck in the mud and whatever," But I think he had to be prompted. He wasn't going to be the first guy to just throw it out there. So you are right that if you ask him, he'll definitely give you the answer you're looking for more often than not. I don't know, have you watched the sit down with Brett yet?
Oh, not yet. The only thing I saw was him signing the can.
Watch it. Watch the full thing. It's well worth it. Well worth it.
Well, for sure, we're going to check that out. The last thing I wanted to say, though, is that if he's not trying to create beef, I do understand because, like you mentioned, he's got an issue with that. We saw with Yancey, they were hugging the entire time and he knocked him out. And people were like, well, that's why you can't be friends with him. But then he fought Nate and I think RDA, and I'm sure there's some I'm forgetting. But as soon as he had beef with him, that's where he was losing. So if I'm Cowboy, I'm doing the strategy of oh, me and Conor were cool, but I think from a fan perspective and people wanting to go and hype, I feel like you do need a little bit more of a storyline. But it's at the same time, it's possible that this press conference is the one that does it. We might get more great lines, but I really hope the media does their job and doesn't give us another Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, where the biggest line is some dude asking him a question about being vegan. I mean,
oh my God.
I hope nobody drops the ball on this one.
Yes. Thankfully, we have more competent media on hand this week. a lot of people that I know will do us right in that aspect. So, yeah. Man, that was so bad. God, I wanted to forget about that.
I'm sorry. All right, so that's going to be all for today here, episode 2 of the MMA Debate Show. Not a whole lot of debate, but, we can't necessarily disagree on every topic, right? So really appreciate you joining, Matt. I mean, it was great to have you on. Let the people know, once again, where can we find you? What kind of stuff are you working on? What do you have coming out? And I'm noticing you're wearing Slip and Dip merch. Where can we get that merchandise at?
Yes, you can get the Slip and Dip merch at our Teespring. If you go to our YouTube channel or if you go to our Twitter, we've got the links right there for you at Slip and Dip Podcast. And of course, subscribe to that YouTube channel too. We would appreciate it. But you can find me personally at Mr. Imwell's Art on Twitter, on Instagram as well, and follow those accounts there. I guess coming up for me, next thing is I will be covering UFC 247 in Houston for Flow Combat. So I will be down there. John Jones, Dominic Reyes. I'm excited for that fight card. A lot of local talent on there as well, so should be a fun night. But yeah, other than that, every week, Slip and Dip Podcast, tune in. We appreciate you guys hopping in. We're working on doing some more stuff throughout the week as well, like doing some live chats and things like that, but still working out the timing and stuff like that. So yeah.